Welcome back. Today I thought we'd have a little look at an article I saw tweeted out by a bit of Brit. And yes, I noticed Paul Joseph Watson made a little video on it, but I'm sure it's just 3 minutes of him saying, well, imagine my shock. The subject concerns a person who is both transgender and transracial and has an accompanying video, so I think we should go through the article and play relevant parts of the video. Tampa, Florida, riding in a flamboyant purple vehicle. Jadu shows up to a coffee shop to open up about his new identity.
Oh, blind!
I'm not entirely sure if that is the correct gender identification, because in the video, well, we'll get to it. Jadu, born a white male named Adam, now considers himself a Filipino. Turns out the purple ride he drives around in is called a tuk-tuk. Yes, basically a bike with a massive shell. An Asian-derived vehicle used for public transit in the Philippines, he says. That is true. Jadu is part of a small but growing community of people who consider themselves transracial. It refers to someone born one race but identifies with another, which raises some rather interesting questions. Or alarm bells. Or questions? Maybe both. Who knows? The most obvious being, are they actually transracial? Is this something that can be medically diagnosed, like gender dysphoria? Or is it another way to try and skirt the cultural appropriation label, which has some negative connotations, but let's face it, it's not all entirely negative. Sound weird? Not to them. Jadu says he grew up enjoying Filipino food, events, and the overall culture. So do a lot of people who move to other countries. They generally integrate, and when they do, if they're white, they are typically accused of culturally appropriating that culture if they come back home, or if they just get obsessed with it. That's not to say that it is exclusive to moving to other countries, or appreciating that culture and integrating with it properly. There are some people who are obsessed with certain decades in certain countries, and so they alter their entire living style and standard accordingly. And there are people from other countries who are obsessed with cultures from other countries, that like yourself, but that doesn't make you transracial. And no, I'm not denying you your racial identity, because yours is one that I'm struggling to quantify. Let's continue with the article. Whenever I'm around the music, around the food, I feel like I'm in my own skin. I hate to be the one to break this to you, but your skin is white, just like your privilege. I'd watch the History Channel sometimes for hours, whenever it came to that, and nothing else intrigued me more but things about Filipino culture. It's quite a broad culture, just saying. I mean, were you ever obsessed with the poverty? Because there's quite a bit of that. Or how about the religious people? They would love you. If you're thinking this sounds familiar, you might remember the story of Rachel Dolezal. Yes, the white girl who pretended to be black by tanning herself. Dolezal was born white, but identifies as black and portrayed herself as such. She was even the president of the Spokane, Washington chapter of the NAACP, which is a funny, funny thing indeed. A white person got put in charge of the African American I can't finish that. After she appeared on an episode of Dr. Phil, the term transracial started to become more widely known. Now we are finding out this community of people who identify as another race is growing. While researching for this, I found some fantastic Poe videos of this, and I will link them in the description. They are very amusing, of people who just mock this idea of it, because it is quite an odd one. Is transracial real or not? And if it is real, if it's not real, is the person instead culturally appropriating? And if so, is that inherently a negative thing or not? Personally, you are culturally appropriating. That's how I see it. But I don't see it as a negative thing. I think it's just something that makes you happy. There's nothing wrong with that. The fact you think yourself to be transracial is a silly thing to say. I feel like it denigrates the word trans, but I could be wrong. And Filipino culture is not You're obsessed with a culture, like weebs. That does not mean you are trans race, because you've said it yourself. Nothing else intrigued me more but things about Filipino culture. That's not doesn't mean you're a race. It's not a race at all. It's culture, or an aspect of Filipino culture that you are obsessed with. Standpoint from a psychologist. Dr. Stacy Schachner, I apologize if I butchered that, is a licensed psychologist with a BA from Washington University, plus MA and doctorate from Florida State, where this loony is from. She hasn't had a client who wanted to change their race, but has worked with many clients wanting to change their body in some way. If someone feels that they feel at home with a certain religion, a certain race, a certain culture, I think that if that's who they really feel inside, life is about finding out what? I think that if that's who they really feel inside, life is about finding out who you are. You're really bad at talking. The more knowledge you have of yourself, the happier you can be, and that's actually fine. But I think the shoehorning of labels is rather silly, and I don't believe it to be transracial, as stated. And as long as I'm not hurting yourself or anyone else, I don't see a problem with that. Quite right. Jadu hasn't told his family yet because he believes they will laugh at the notion of changing your ethnicity. He is not changing his ethnicity. To me, this is no different than someone who is obsessed with movies, obsessed with superheroes, obsessed with something, anything really. That obsession is no different, and that's how you've portrayed this. But I could be wrong. If I am, please tell me in the comments. Preventing fraud. Your race can make you more marketable and in some cases eligible for certain benefits, jobs and scholarships. After a quick Google search for ethnic scholarships, we found that a Filipino scholarship was the second option that popped up. Many might question Jadu's intentions or say that he is a perfect case of cultural appropriation. He knows this can be a problem, but this is the thing, you've made it seem like cultural appropriation is a bad thing. I don't think it's a bad thing in all instances, but I can understand that it can be perceived as negative sometimes. Because this person is a white male, although has indicated transgender, so I'm not entirely sure, people might see it as an inherent negative because of that white male privilege. And the racial element has been debunked so many times. People like Rachel Dolezal, that German chick who basically dark roasted herself on tanning beds and had melanin injections. Oh, and let's not forget Talcum X, who still thinks he's black. Has anyone told him yet that to be black, your skin actually has to be black, or have some kind of darkness to it, not look like it's being basically dipped in talcum powder? For me, this person is not transracial, but if they want to identify as that, that's their decision and they're free to. But I'm also free to be critical of that label because, as of yet, there is no medical diagnosis for it. There's nothing to support it as real. It's not real. It's a feeling, and it's not a feeling really with you because you basically indicated it's entirely culturally influenced, not influenced by ethnicity at all. That sounds wrong, but I know what I mean. And I think most of my viewers know what I mean as well. So in short, you're not trans race, you're basically culturally appropriating. For God's sake, you live in Florida still. You imported a tuk-tuk. Oh dear. Okay, I think we're done with this. This is amusing. Before we end this, I forgot to include a clip of the video referenced in the article. So take it away, Jadu.
It's a tuk-tuk. They use them a lot in the Philippines. Whenever I'm around the music, I'm around the food, I feel like I'm in my own skin. I'd watch the History Channel sometimes for hours. Whenever it came to that, and nothing else intrigued me more, but things about Filipino culture. I would never say it was a privilege to be unhappy with yourself all the time. Well, the funny thing is I had to make sure that it wasn't just me, because if it's just me, then there must be something wrong, or maybe I'm just strange. So I created the group in hopes of getting our message out in a bottle, and people started to join. People started to message me about their conflictions with themselves. My family knows about my transsexuality, but they don't know anything about this. It's just my mom is kind of an older world person. And I just think that telling her something like that is just too wild.
Perhaps I could have summed this video up with one word.
Breakfast